One of the first things to consider in handling modest-sized sheets of glass is safety. The most common problem is getting cut. Cuts can be avoided by wearing gloves, but some practitioners find that gloves diminish sensitivity and make it difficult to cut effectively. We find that cuts can mostly be avoided by simply taking care and paying attention to sharp edges. Glass cuts to the hands are generally only a minor nuisance. They should be cleaned and bandaged to prevent the spread of blood in the workspace. Glass chips in the eyes are dangerous, and damage can be serious and permanent. Fortunately, they're easily avoided with the proper protective equipment. Always wear safety glasses when scoring and breaking glass. We also recommend that you wear long pants and closed-toed shoes in case you drop any glass. Basic glass cutting requires few tools. For cutting bullseye glass in a variety of thicknesses, we recommend a lubricant dispensing glass cutter with a 135-degree angle carbide steel cutting wheel. These cutters produce cleaner scores resulting in predictable breaks, and their carbide steel wheels will last much longer than the softer, dry steel wheels on some other cutters. A lubricant is essential to keep the cutter wheel rolling smoothly and to ensure score lines that can be easily run. Various types of lubricants work well. In kiln forming, many people use mineral spirits because they evaporate cleanly and leave little or no residue on the glass. However, a good cutting oil will provide superior cutting performance and is easy to clean off of the glass. Oil is also less harmful to skin than mineral spirits and does not pose the same vapor hazards. Most glass scores can be run or broken with the hands alone. A combination breaking, grozing pliers is often used for narrow strips or intricate angles. Running pliers, some of which have adjustable jaws, help to center pressure evenly for clean breaks with a simple squeezing action. The cutting surface should be flat, firm, and forgiving, such as this tabletop, which has been covered with marmoleum. The kind of self-healing mat you might use with an X-Acto knife also makes an ideal cutting surface when set on a flat tabletop. An unforgiving or uneven surface is inappropriate because the cutting wheel can be nicked or flattened as it runs off the edge of the glass. The sheet of glass can break when its weight is unevenly distributed on the cutting surface. The cutting surface should also be free of glass chips because they can scratch the glass, create unintentional score lines, and mar iridescent or dichroic coatings. Clean the surface frequently with a bench brush. Never wipe the surface with your bare hands, as you would likely get painful cuts. A glass cutter does not shear or saw the glass. Rather, the cutting wheel rolls across the surface to create a shallow fissure known as the score line. The score line breaks the surface tension and allows the glass to open when pressure is applied downwards on either side of this fissure. The right amount of pressure must be placed on the cutting wheel to create a clean edge that's free of nicks and chips. Too much pressure results in a gritty score line with flakes and chips. This will be difficult, if not impossible, to break cleanly. Too little pressure can result in a fissure that is not continuous. Such a score line can break unpredictably. A good score can usually be heard as a light zipping sound. It should not be harsh or grating. A good score can also be identified by sight. It is uniformly shallow and continuous without flakes or grit. Before making the score, test to see if the cutter is dispensing lubricant by rolling it along a piece of paper or the cutting surface while applying light pressure. A wet or dark line indicates that lubricant is flowing. The classic method of holding a glass cutter is between the first and second finger, with the index finger above the wheel and the thumb under. The thick stem of some self-lubricating cutters can make this position uncomfortable. That's why many people hold such cutters just as one would hold a pen. Any hand position that allows the user to exert adequate and even pressure while holding the cutting wheel perpendicular to the glass surface is proper. The cutter may be either pushed or pulled across the surface. Even pressure and uniform speed are more important than direction. Be sure to continue the score off the edge of the glass. This will make it easier to predictably run the score. To break out the score, pressure is applied downwards on one or both sides of it to lever it open and cause it to run the length of the line. This pressure can be applied by placing the thumbs on top of the glass to either side of the score with the fingers placed under the score line to act as a fulcrum. It should be fairly easy to run the score and break the glass. If it is not, something is not right. Do not try to force the run, and do not retrace a poor score. Retracing will only cause a gouge in the glass and damage the cutting wheel. Such a score will not run or break evenly. If you need to score the glass again along the same line, turn it over and attempt the score on the opposite side of the glass. Then break it along the score line with your thumbs to either side of the score and your fingers beneath it. To break straight cuts, one can also use a straight edge placed directly beneath the score line. Align the straight edge with the score line and exert downward pressure to either side of the score. The score can also be opened with breaking pliers. These are used by putting the flat part of the jaw atop the glass and the curved part of the jaw under the glass, and then levering and pulling the glass simultaneously. Running pliers have a bottom jaw which acts like a fulcrum, while the top jaw places downward pressure to either side of the score. Another way to run a score is by breaking it over the edge of a table, or by breaking it over any other instrument that works as a fulcrum. Whenever you run a score, keep the glass close to the cutting surface so that if it drops, it is less likely to break. If allowed to sit too long, a score line will begin to develop fractures radiating along its entire length, especially if the score line is dry. Such fractures make it nearly impossible to break glass cleanly. A score should always be run as quickly as possible after it has been made. If the sheet of glass that you are cutting has a rolled edge, it may be difficult to get the score to run cleanly. It will almost always tend to run towards the rolled edge. For this reason, you should cut off the rolled edge before attempting further cuts on the glass. Different types of glass will score and break differently. In general, thin glasses will be easier to cut than thicker glasses, and transparent glasses will be easier to cut than opalescent glasses. A transparent glass that's 1.5 millimeters thick is easily scored and broken by hand, using very little force. Notice how quietly the glass breaks when the score is run. A standard 3 millimeters thick transparent glass is also easily scored and broken by hand. A transparent glass that's 6 millimeters thick is scored using the same pressure one would use for 3 millimeter glass, but it opens more readily using pliers than by hand. Notice the louder noise when breaking this glass. Scoring an opalescent glass will be much quieter than scoring a transparent glass. The quieter sound when scoring opalescent glasses often causes practitioners to press harder than necessary. They try to elicit the same sound they're accustomed to hearing when cutting transparent glasses. This additional pressure can actually result in a bad score that causes the glass to break unpredictably. If you have trouble cutting opalescent glasses because you can't hear the score being made, consider flipping the glass over to cut on the bottom side of the sheet. This side will have a thin layer of transparent material, which when scored will make a sound that's closer to the one you're accustomed to hearing. Some bullseye glasses, such as single-rolled cat's paw sheets, have irregular surfaces that are nevertheless very smooth, even if not completely flat. Their smooth surfaces are easily scored for clean breaks. Other bullseye glasses have much heavier textures, making them difficult, if not impossible, to uniformly score with a glass cutter on the textured surface. When working with a high-profile texture, cut on the backside or smoother side of the sheet. A glass cutter with a small diameter wheel will help to maintain a uniform score line, resulting in a clean break. Iridescent and/or dichroic coatings can chip and flake when scored. To prevent this, keep the cutting wheel well lubricated. This will prevent glass flecks from clogging the wheel and causing it to skip. Or cut on the non-coated side of the sheet. If you do this, take care that your cutting surface is free of chips that could scratch the coating. Simple curves are readily scored and broken out by hand. Gentle outside curves can generally be broken on a single score line. Sometimes it may be necessary to run the score from both ends, and running pliers are especially helpful for this task. A sharp outside curve may require additional scores to break out the shape. Run the original score as far as possible before beginning to make the additional scores, which should terminate into the already run original score. Run these new score lines and remove the broken glass. Then continue to use the pliers to further open the original score until you have broken out your intended shape. Sharp inside curves can be a little more challenging than sharp outside curves. They also require that you make additional scores to get the desired piece of glass. Make the score, then run it as far as you are able to from both ends of the score. Next, make an interior score that begins at the already run score line and terminates at the edge of the glass. Run this score and remove the unwanted glass. Then continue to run the original score. Make additional interior scores in the previous fashion until you have removed all the unwanted glass and are left with the desired inside curve. Cutting perfect circles out of glass is readily achieved with the correct equipment and approach. The equipment required includes a studio circle cutter such as this one, which has a suction cup, measurements in imperial and metric units, a trailing ball-bearing cutting head, and a rotating handle. You will also need cutting oil, a brush to apply the oil, running pliers, a glass cutter, and breaking pliers. Begin with a piece of glass that is slightly larger than the circle you intend to cut. For instance, for a 9-inch circle, you might begin with a 10-inch square. As you become more experienced, you can decrease the margin between the circle and the edge of the outer glass. but a 1/4 inch is usually the minimum margin necessary to successfully cut the circle. Set the measurement by loosening the brass screw on top of the cutting head and moving it along the bar while reading the measurement to the inside of the brass housing. Be sure to tighten the brass screw after setting the measurement so that it won't move while you're scoring the circle. Position the circle cutter in the center of the glass and then depress the lever while exerting slight downward pressure to adhere the suction cup. To lubricate the glass, set a brush that's been dipped in cutting oil under the cutting head. Make 1 revolution of the circle cutter without allowing the cutting wheel to contact the glass. If you're right-handed, place your left hand atop the suction cup to hold everything steady. Then reach across your left wrist to grasp the black knob of the cutter. Paying close attention to where you begin, start making the score using even pressure. Score the full circle in one continuous motion, listening for an even, zipping sound. Slow down slightly as the cutting wheel comes close to completing the circuit, in order to feel and hear when the score meets its beginning, which will make a slight clicking sound. Stop as soon as you hear and feel this. Do not continue past your starting point. The next step is to run the score line. This can be done in many ways, but the most reliable is to use your breaking pliers. Bring your glass to the edge of the table so the score line is directly above the edge. Hold the glass with one hand and grasp it with the pliers, flat side on top. Then apply gentle downward pressure with the pliers. You should see the score line open and begin to move through the glass, becoming a line that extends from the top surface to the bottom of the glass. Continue to rotate the piece of glass and reposition the pliers before again applying gentle downward pressure with the pliers. The leading edge of the opening score should always be on the edge of the table. Do not try to open too much of the score at once. Rather, expect to open small increments before rotating the glass again. After the score line has been entirely opened, make 4 more score lines from the edge of the circle to the outside edge of the glass, perpendicular to the circle. Take care not to score over the interior edge of the circle. When you open these 4 new score lines with the running pliers, a perfect circle will emerge, with clean edges that are free of chips and bumps.